Let's get started. So, hi there, folks. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Calvin, and you're listening to the first episode of SeedPod, a podcast about the natural world. Before we jump into things, let's introduce our other hosts. John, do you want to get started? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is John, and I'm a forester.
All right, and then AJ.
Yeah, I'm AJ, and I'm a wildlife biologist.
Wonderful. And my name's Calvin. I'm a forester and a wildlife biologist. Before we get into anything, I do need to do a quick disclaimer. Everything in this podcast is strictly the views of the speakers. They do not represent those of our employers. And please don't try to find our employers. We're doing this for fun and to help people, so we don't need to get them involved. Seedpod is a podcast about the natural world. We are a trio of scientists and natural resources managers that we just want to teach you, the listener, about the natural world, how it works, how science works, how we manage it, and just neat stuff about nature. So we're gonna do episodes and everything from how forests work, how oaks work, to jaguars in the southeastern United States, how the border wall is impacting wildlife across the southeastern United States, and even some things about how modern war impacts ecosystems and people who rely on ecosystems. So it's going to be a pretty broad podcast here, just about anything in the natural world, because we have some broad interests, and we think it's neat. We want to teach you neat stuff. We're going to have a bi-weekly episode release, so we're going to be releasing one episode every 2 weeks. I'm hosting right now, but we are pretty busy scientists and managers, so we're going to have a rotating host here. And that's just a little bit about SeedPod. Do you guys have anything you want to add?
Not really. Yeah, that pretty much covered it. The idea was to do a podcast for normal people, not people like us that are already woodland creatures. So we kind of wanted to just bring nature to the public.
Yep. I will say we've got a couple interesting guys that we're looking at. I'm not quite going to say they're all just got a lot of ideas for weird guys of forestry, so that should be pretty interesting as well. Little biographies.
Wonderful. Okay, so before we get into talking some more about SeedPod and why we're here, what gives us the right to do this podcast, and what our expertise is, let's have our first segment here. So at the start of every at the start of every episode, we're going to have this segment that's called the Forest Minute, where we just take a minute to talk about something neat that happened to us in the woods today. Or not even today, just this week. And we're doing this because it's fun, and we just want to have fun with the woods. We're going to talk about some things that can get pretty depressing, so let's have a little fun. All right, AJ, what was a fun thing that you had happen to you in the woods today?
So last week, I actually saw the first swallowtail kite of the season kind of circling our smoke plume from one of our prescribed burns. It's always nice to see those guys coming back. They're real pretty birds.
Okay, so what is a swallowtail kite? Since I like birds, but I have no idea what the heck this thing looks like. Also, you're on a complete other side of the country compared to me.
Yeah. So I mean, a kite is just it's a raptor. It's technically a bird of prey, but they pretty much just eat insects. And a swallowtail kite is one with a nice big long swallowy tail.
Okay.
They really commonly will circle smoke plumes or also just ag fields because they're nabbing up all the insects flying up. Like you'll see them following behind combines and stuff like that too.
Okay, cool.
All right, John, your turn.
Oh, yeah. So this week we're getting. This is the last couple of weeks where it's calm before the storm of tree planting season. So I've got 22,000 seedlings that I have to plant this year, and then so ahead of that though, I am going ahead and harvesting a whole bunch of willow for this stream restoration program. So I live in the Midwest and corn country, so a lot of what we're trying to do is save the what remaining water quality we have and try to shade out some trout streams and add diversity back to, and even just stabilize banks. So I am cutting and processing, and then promptly sticking in a bank a whole bunch of willow. And then at home, I actually just finished up my first maple syrup tapping season. So I've got like 2 quarts of maple syrup that I boiled down and got processed. And also I made some charcoal for fun because why not?
Wonderful. So my forest minute is I finished marking a crop tree release, and I finished it at 4. And the last tree that I marked, it was exactly when I ran out of paint, And so it worked out perfectly because I was like, haha, it's 4 o'clock on Friday, so I get to leave at a normal time. And I don't have any more paint. But I don't need any more paint because I'm out of trees. So this is perfect. So it was great. And then because it's, natural resources, I left at 4 o'clock on Friday and I got home at like 6 because it's, had to drive an hour and a half to get to the site.
Of course.
Yeah.
So was it actually like a crop tree release where you're releasing oak, or is it just you having to, cut out a whole bunch of elm from an oak?
No,
or something
surprisingly, this site regenerated very well with oak. It's a southern facing and it's pretty steep. So there's it's pretty good oak regen. So we actually have enough oaks that we can select against. I'm actually cutting a few oaks. I had to remark part of this stand because I didn't hit the oaks hard enough. So in a crop tree release, you have a single tree that you're trying to get to grow faster, and so the idea is you cut any competition around it. So those are going to be other trees. You cut them down, and then you get your crop tree, the tree you're most interested, and you get that to grow a little bit faster, and it gets into the overstory a little bit faster, and it's just going to be more successful. So that's what the idea of a crop tree release is. Really, we have a lot of issues with oak regeneration, so it's not common that I can actually I'm releasing oaks, and to release those oaks, I'm cutting down less competitive oaks. So it doesn't happen often, but happened at this site, and it was kind of tough because I had to go a lot slower than I normally go because it was I gotta really look at and picture these trees and figure out what's gonna go and what's gonna stay. Whereas
we had one I think 2 weeks ago I was telling you about where it was a planted site, it grew past deer browse and stuff like that. White oak, a notoriously slow grower, was getting outcompeted by everybody else, but there were a couple patches on those poor sandier sites where it was oh, I actually have to cut out red oak to release white oak and all that sort of stuff. So it's an odd feeling. Normally I'm hitting maybe 50 oaks, and here I found hundreds that I could release, and it was a good feeling.
You'll love to see it.
You're not just going through and just nailing maples and hickories and stuff to get rid of.
Okay,
it's fucking slippery elm out here for us.
Slippery elm, there you go.
I wouldn't cut hickory to release oak. I like hickory a lot, and they're important. Plus, they're not overly competitive. They're gonna be a small part of a lot of forests, but they're not gonna really suppress oak.
Welcome to. I need to introduce you to bitternut hickory.
I like bitternut hickory.
It's bitternut, it's elm, it's hackberry, and cherry. Those are the four things on a slightly mesic site here. Even just a little bit, and it just explodes into that. It's a nightmare.
That is where bitternut will do well. So as you guys, as you the listener could tell, we're pretty nerdy and pretty into what we do. So let's dig into. We'll try to keep these diatribes to a minimum, but I can't promise that. So let's kind of jump into some of our qualifications.
If we're gonna go off the rails, we need to at least explain basics while we're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, what led me to be this way?
Okay. So that is exactly our first question. So John, how did you end up in natural resources? And why are you?
So hang on to your butts. This is gonna be a little bit. So, from the ages of whatever to sometime in high school, I was always brought outside to go hiking with my family and stuff like that. But I hated the outdoors with a virulent passion. I did not want to be outside. I was miserable every time. It was hot. It was sweaty. It was gross. I was tired. It was the worst. And then I read a book about John Muir as a high schooler, about junior year of high school. And the only way I've been able to describe it is it's a religious experience. So I work with and have talked to a lot of folks that ended up, taking religious vows and stuff like that. And so the similar thing that they decided, hey, I'm going to go become a priest or something like that. It was the same thing, but for forestry and trees. Never, my parents being middle class, upper middle class people who worked white collar jobs, they never knew that forestry was an option. It was either you're going to become some sort of white collar office professor thing, or you are going to be a retail worker, and you can't be a retail worker because that's bad in air quotes for some reason. Anyways, yeah, so I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. And so I went to school for history for 2 years. And I was a terrible, terrible, terrible historian. I just wanted to tell stories, like just read books and tell stories. And that's not what modern history is. Like, no one needs you to, write another history, narrative history of the Roman Republic. Like, that's boring. So I did that for 2 years, and then I said, screw this noise. I applied to a bunch of forestry schools out west to get out of town, and then I went to school and got a forestry degree and never looked back. And so I've been doing this nonstop since then. So yeah, it was not something that was in the cards for me as a younger person. My grandmother jokes like, "Oh, I never expected John was going to be the person who spends all this time outdoors, hiking, camping, backpacking, all that sort of stuff. He was going to be the one that was inside until the dawn of time or whatever." So a little bit different than most
So
people.
how did you find you came from no background really in the outdoors? How did you find forestry? What did that look like for you?
It was literally, I read a book on John Muir, said I want to be outside. Oh, I want to join the National Park Service because that's the only exposure I had to that. Okay, just start Googling, man. Like, okay, National Park Service. And then this was also when some of the really big wildfires out west were happening. I was like, okay. And I just started watching the news on that. I was like, okay, that's like, okay, it's Forest Service. Okay, what's the Forest Service do? Forestry. I guess this is going to be a little bit easier than becoming a natural park or national park ranger. Okay, and just kind of worked backwards from that for a couple months, just trying to literally back engineer what the heck forestry is from first principles because no one in my town knew what that was. I'm from suburban Connecticut, like the most like not natural resources filled area or stereotypically filled area. So like it was weird.
Okay, so then after you graduated with your degree, what did you do next?
So I moved around a lot. I went to work for the Forest Service for a little bit. I went to work in private consulting, and now I work for the company I work for. And I do forestry stuff. I worked in California for a couple years. That was miserable. I Whenever anyone thinks of the redwoods, they think of these majestic trees, and you can get around easily in the and there's nothing in the understory, or it's not that hard to get around the understory. I literally spent 10 hours one day, air quotes, cruising timber, measuring trees for the uninitiated, on my hands and knees. I stood up to do my plot measurements and stuff like that, and then I got back on my hands and knees and just did that for 10 hours. I hate the redwoods so much. Like, it's a cool tree, but Christ alive, I hate them. Like, for doing forestry work, I suppose. Ugh. But yeah, now I'm out here. I do a lot more work with hardwood, like central hardwoods and stuff like that. So, it's a grab bag mixture of restoration and production forestry and tons of invasives, which we'll no doubt get into in a couple episodes.
Yeah, and well, don't worry. Well, for you listeners who are excited at the idea of the redwoods as well as John Muir, both of those are definitely topics that we'll get into later. There's a lot of interesting things about redwoods and John Muir, but we don't need to spoil all the podcast episodes. All right, AJ, you're up.
Mine different from John's. My background is a little bit different from John's, but kind of similar. So I grew up. We were always camping and hiking and everything, and I loved it. I lived for that stuff. Then at some point, I guess around maybe high school, I kind of forgot that I loved all that shit, all that stuff, and went to college, and I somehow landed on I was going to be a high school history teacher. So I got an undergraduate degree in history, and did that for like 5 seconds, and it sucked. So then I kind of remembered like what I actually enjoyed doing, and picked up an internship with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service doing environmental education because I had the education background and I do enjoy teaching. But from there, it just kind of springboarded into more field work type jobs. I wanted to get in the muck. I wanted to be flipping rocks. I wanted to be doing all that kind of stuff. So I did seasonal wildlife work for a number of years all across the country. I think I've lived and worked in 9 states at this point doing wildlife. And then I went back to grad school, got my graduate degree in fisheries, wildlife, conservation biology, and now I work where I work.
So, wildlife's a pretty difficult field to get employed in. Did you know that going into wildlife, or were you just like, oh, this is neat birds and stuff?
Pretty much that. I at that time it was a difficult field to get permanent employment in. It was less difficult to get the seasonal jobs, and the more of those you do, like so many fields, you build up a good pad of good references and build a good reputation, and then people will hire you. But yeah, I knew it was going to be tough. That was honestly a big part of what drove my decision to go into the graduate work that I did, because I don't have a particular love for studying game species, but that's what I did my graduate work in, because I knew that background would be a lot easier to get a full-time job with a game background rather than a non-game. There's not a whole lot of salamander biologist positions out there, but game bird biologist, easy peasy. Yeah, exactly. Fur and feathers, baby. Fur and feathers.
They call them hook and bullet biologists.
I was gonna say white-tailed deer and all that sort of stuff pays the bills. Where then he can. Yep.
Yeah. Tough being non-hook and bullet.
I find it fascinating that we have
I mean, given where we all ran into each other, it's not that surprising.
Adjacent history people as well, which is fascinating. Given where the yes. Correct. Yeah.
That part makes all those years of
that part makes sense.
None of that was game species. I just did game species for
that's just funny.
Grad school basically, and then now for the big bucks, of wildlife biology.
Yeah, and I will say, it remains true right now.
Yeah, for the big bucks,
it's very difficult to get full-time employment in wildlife if you don't have a master's.
Yeah, I got a buddy in the same town I live in, and he was ecology, same route you went, Tony, but he just couldn't. I don't know. He didn't really want to bother getting the master's degree, and so he's ended up working for a pretty big museum in the area that also is an aquarium. So he does a whole bunch of stuff with that and mussel.
I need to change my display name,
like freshwater mussel work. So it's pretty cool, but like.
Okay. All right. Run it again there, boss. All right. Ready? All right.
Oh,
AJ,
shit.
So how did you get into the outdoors? Why are you here with us today?
Oh, we're starting from the top.
Wait, no. So what was the part that we need to re-record?
It was just when John was telling his story about his friend.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So if we can start at that point, we should be
retell the story.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so AJ, it's funny how I've got a buddy who's a freshwater biologist, and
all right, excellent.
He's a freshwater aquarist right now, but he followed pretty much the same route you did, and he just had a tough time of it, and I've lost the whole train of this now that we had to re-record it.
I was just going to try to...
We'll just cut the whole thing out.
Cut from
19 to 20. Clap or whatever.
I'll figure out how to make marks in this,
let's get back into things
Audacity.
Here. Okay. So now it's my turn for my story for how I got into natural resources. So I also don't have a great reason for being in natural resources. I was a Boy Scout for like my entire life growing up, and then I went to school. When I went to school, I applied for wildlife biology, and then I found out that there are basically no jobs in wildlife biology, and you have to have a master's to get a full-time job in wildlife biology, or you have to do what AJ did and move around 7 times. And I was like, well, that kind of sounds like it sucks. So I added on a dual major in forestry and wildlife. So I get trained as so I have a dual degree in forestry and wildlife. So I work on both sides of the ball. Usually you're either a forester or a wildlife biologist. I do both. I've never actually practiced as a wildlife biologist because it's tough to work in. So I actually am a forester who works, with wildlife stuff, but just as a forester. I worked at a regional timber company in the Midwest for a little while. Lost that job when it got reorganized, and then I went and I got a graduate degree in the Southeast. Worked on Paris Island, and then I moved up to the Mid Atlantic, and so now I'm a forester and educator up here in the Mid Atlantic. Been doing this for about 10 years. Oh, Paris Island, South Carolina. It's it. The fun thing about Paris Island um, is that it is the
Okay,
marine
where's
recruiting
Paris
station
Island?
for all of the recruits
Okay.
who get recruited east of the Mississippi, as well as all the females. Yeah, I've actually been through the Crucible
Okay.
on Page
I was
Field
gonna
like
put a crayon eating joke
five
in
or
here,
seven
but that's
times.
the
I can't
wrong.
remember. Somehow
Wrong
we always
folks for
managed to
that.
do those plots when we were like when the Crucible was happening. So the Crucible is when like the recruits get desensitized to the sounds of modern war, and there's like a bunch of like screaming and all kinds of stuff and like music and air like air compressed 50 cals going off, all kinds of stuff. It makes for not great time to be doing forest inventory plots.
I can imagine.
Someone's like trying to give you like a tree diameter, and you're like, I need that wax myrtle again. I couldn't hear it over the blood curdling scream. Oh, hold on, the 50 cal's about to go off. Just wait. All right. Oh, what was that one? So fun time, and then also because it's a sea island in South Carolina, it's subtropical, and so the understory is super dense, and just like you had problems, John, in the redwoods crawling around. There were some plots you just had to crawl around in because it was just impenetrable. So not always the best place to work, but now I work in nicer forests. I work with a lot of hardwoods. I like hardwood silviculture. It's fantastic. It's really fun, and I get to be creative. I have no good reason for being in forestry. I just kind of ended up here. AJ, how did you end up in wildlife biology? What's your reason for doing this?
I mean, if you had asked me at any point in my childhood what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would have said park ranger because that was the job that I knew existed in this field. I mean, wildlife is fun. Plants are they're neat, but they don't move
Get
around.
out of here!
They're kind of boring.
Get out of here!
I know. No, it's I don't know. The wildlife is fun. They're quirky. They all have their own little
Boo!
species have personalities, and then even within their individuals within the species have their own personalities. There's always fun interactions and things going on. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun.
All right, John. Same question.
Oh, honestly, calling. Like, it sounds like I'm puffing myself up and stuff like that, but like, I like you, Calvin. Like, it is something that I don't, I kind of both stumbled into it, but also like I truly believe like this is the thing that I know the most about, and just this is the thing that I have the most fun with. Even it's 90 freaking degrees out in the middle of the Midwest, the corn sweat is getting to you, and I'm spraying invasive somehow still, and I still do it, and I still at the end of the day like it.
No, there's definitely an element
it seems
of
like I'm a
we
bit, like,
are doing
I don't
stuff
know,
that most people
off my own
can't
ass about it,
and
but
wouldn't
like
want to do,
Yeah.
and we're able to enjoy it,
Yeah.
and that's it's unique.
Yeah. Also, John, what is the corn sweat? Explain for folks what that is, real quick.
I was gonna say because I'm just thinking of like the meat sweats when you eat too much meat, but I don't think
yeah.
it's.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so it's kind of like that weirdly, I think. So if you are in roughly Iowa, Illinois, a good chunk of Indiana, maybe southern Wisconsin, basically the Corn Belt of the United States, in around July to August, when the corn is both green and at its peak height, it is transpiring so much friggin' moisture through its system that it actually creates a bubble, like a wet bulb bubble, so a really high humidity bubble in the in the Corn Belt to the point where it's measurable. So that's part of one of the great things about climate change is that as the amount of temperature goes up, more moisture could be held in the atmosphere. As more moisture is getting held in the atmosphere, it's just more and more humidity is pumped out by the corn, which is adapted, is constantly year over year getting adapted to just be able to function better in this climate because it's an.
Are we going to do
crop
an
that's got
episode just on
billions of dollars
for
behind
sure.
it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Like I figured
And
we
so,
have to.
yeah, it just makes life a little bit extra miserable if you're in the Midwest.
Yeah, it's basically
oh,
just
We're going to have some opinions.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's going to be
the
one
corn
I.
spreads are basically corn just
it's angry
as a-
yelling
as
on my
a
side.
green humidifier for the whole middle of the United States.
Oh God.
Awesome.
Yeah. Like if this was anywhere else, it'd be
Is
better,
it?
I guess. I don't know.
You
but
may not know this.
it's
We
just
might need to find
miserable.
a.
And it's for about a month before
Is it
things
enough
start to dry
actually
out.
impact
In August.
weather systems on just outside of that local area, like that much moisture being pumped into the air, into the atmosphere. Is it?
I mean, yeah, at least for Iowa, there's just, I mean, if you look at a map of how much area is in row crop, you got to assume at least 50% of Iowa is just corn, and that's some insane number of millions of acres, and it's like I would assume so. I don't know the math, but I would assume so just because of how much area is being and now multiply that across the entire area of the Corn Belt. I think we do need a weather biologist, a meteorologist. There we go. On it, but yeah, it definitely. I think it does play a factor on the amount of rain, not necessarily the intensity of rain in the Midwest, but we had a rainstorm here that it was half an hour, and we got 2.5 inches of rain, and then that was it. And it was only in this one a small town got this. Everywhere else, nothing or very little. 2.5 inches of rain, half an hour, and yeah, caused some really fun flooding, localized flooding. But that's just kind of messed up.
I just want to take a quick second to kind of explain transpiration a little bit more. So for just because John and I are huge plant nerds, and so this is jumps right into our head, and this is pretty obvious to us. But plants are basically just pumps that take water from the ground and release it into the air as water vapor, as part of as part of photosynthesis. We'll explain all that in our next episode, which is going to be about how forests work. But part of photosynthesizing is releasing water molecules continuously out of the stomata of a plant. It's part of the evapo.
It's a later problem.
Water from the roots throughout the system and then up and out. But that's for the next episode. We don't need to get. Yeah. We'll get into the hardcore botany in the next episode. We don't need to get into all of that today. The next episode is where we explain how all these things work. Today is just for why are we here. I will say, John, I completely agree. I do think that, and this is again going to sound kind of uppity, but it just really is what it is. I do think that a lot of natural resources really is, it's a calling. It
better be, because it sure as shit ain't the salary
we're meant to be in, and that holds us tight whether we like it or not. Sometimes for the good.
Yeah. I was gonna say that joke is we don't get paid shit, and I'm like, oh, I was talking. So complete side tangent. This is already happening. I was talking to a fellow. I was doing a consulting gig for someone, and he was saying oh yeah, I used to be a soil scientist in the 1980s or something like that. And he and I were just he was swapping stories about. I think he was down in the south along the the Pine Barren flats, that sort of thing, and how he would just crawl through ticks all day, and yada yada yada. Same thing that all of us have been doing for so long. And he's like, yeah, and I got paid $30 an hour. I'm just like, buddy, I barely get paid $30 an hour. I don't get paid $30 an hour depending on the job. So I sat with that for a second of just like, oh no.
Yeah, that's why I'm in natural resources. It's really the money, the fame, and the women. That's how I got into natural resources.
Hey, in my defense, I met my wife through natural resources, so yes, I am in it for the women.
The woman.
Yeah, woman, yeah, singular.
I got into natural resources for absolutely no good reason. I don't know why I got into natural resources. I can tell you that at this point, I think about trees. Trees and ecosystems. I think for at least 16 hours a day for most days. It is just absolutely something that it's just taken over my life, for better and for worse. I will do presentations in my sleep. My wife wakes me up sometimes if I'm giving a bad presentation. So it's
Jesus.
absolutely something that it's just there. It's just all I think about and all I do. Excuse me, which is good because it's my job, but it is what it is, man. I'm all the way in. There's no out for me. I work on forests at least 5 days a week, usually 6. Yeah. I got another reason that we're doing this podcast is because we're deeply concerned about the systems that we work with. I hate to talk about forest as systems, but in this case, I'm going to give the systematic approach. I don't like the systematic approach because I think it takes away the beauty and the majesty of what these things are and just like how cool everything is. But like, we'll give it the systems approach for a second. So I think about ecosystems so much because we are really at a turning point in a lot of them, and we can push them in. We can save some of them and do good things with a lot of them. Some of them are really challenged, but I think for most of our ecosystems we have a lot of problems, and because I have a lot of education and skill to work on them and to help save them, that's why I work on them and help save them so much. Also, forestry doesn't pay enough for me to not have a second job also in forestry, so you got to have 2 jobs to make it work, unfortunately for me. But yeah, no, I feel that I am both addicted and called to this profession. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm doing this. So let's just kind of break down for a second, just to give folks an interior look at us. What do we feel about
day?
Right? What is it like to work in the woods and work as a forester or as a wildlife biologist?
AJ, you can go first.
No, and even
that's one of the great things.
What is a wildlife biologist? That can be
is like
50, 100 different jobs, with each day of that person being different. So some days you're doing veg sampling, some days you're trapping animals and putting transmitters on them, or color bands on birds, or you're taking blood samples from marine mammals, or it could be anything. It could be literally anything. Sometimes you're doing actual land management, and you're doing prescribed burns, or managing brood fields, or writing management plans for timber. Usually having to fight the forester on that one a little bit sometimes. That's a locality thing. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's just so incredibly.
I think that's a locality based thing.
If you were entirely boat based, I've done jobs that were walking just walking in grids. I've done jobs that involved airplanes. Like it's all over the place. It could be anything you could almost possibly imagine. And some days you're sitting at a computer writing a report, or writing a plan that you don't really want to write, or you're doing data entry and QA/QC on that, or you're doing analysis of the data. So not every day is in the woods, but the days that are make up for the ones that aren't.
Okay, how about you, Calvin? Because that's what AJ is saying. It's like he's a wildlife biologist, but he's doing wildlife biology things all day. Calvin, you're all over the place as far as forestry goes. Without getting too much into your side of thing, your actual job and stuff like that, like you do 5 different things off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's because I have ADHD and chronic fear. That's why I do a lot of things. Um, yeah, so I, most days you'll find me teaching folks in one way or another. Sometimes it's in the classroom, sometimes it's out of the classroom. And then if I'm not doing that, I'm setting up to teach folks. So I'll be like, organizing workshops, webinars, that kind of stuff. Or I'm out in the woods actually managing forests. Again, very few days are the same. Um, just because that's the nature of natural resources is you just can't do the same thing sometimes you could do close to the same thing every day, but they're never really the same. But you can't you can't do the same thing every day because no two forests are the same, and so it's always going to be a little bit different. So if I'm not teaching folks, I'm working on. If I'm not teaching folks on one way or another, I'm working on the consulting side of the ball, which is my other second job, which is for fun. And so that looks like I'm spraying invasive species in the summer. I'm marking and then cutting crop tree releases, low shade removals, stuff like that. Working with private landowners, ripping out lawns and putting in native meadows and stuff like that. Trying to create habitat anywhere I can. I also do some international work. So I'll be doing some of that this summer, but just I have a lot of interests, and I follow those interests as they take me. The fun thing about natural resources is that it's a pretty small field. So once you start, like doing a few things, you kind of meet a lot of the folks, and there's always problems. People are always willing to take help. So there's lots of places to go and to do things. Yeah. So what an average day looks like for me is sometimes I'm in the truck driving down to a site, like it's an hour away, and I'm marking a low shade removal. Sometimes I'm going back and I'm cutting that low shade removal or spraying invasive species. Sometimes I'm going to New York City to educate people about the impacts of the war in Ukraine on ecosystems. I go anywhere to teach people about natural resources, and I'll do a lot of things in the woods because I love the woods, and I'll do whatever it takes for these ecosystems to be happy and healthy.
And I think that's where we differ. You do a lot of. You're all over the place, and mine's. I very much follow the seasons weirdly, and it's always the same thing for each season. And so, like, if it's, we'll start with spring. Spring is I lose my brain and I just plant nonstop, and I just become a literal machine, and then I take a couple days off, and then it's the first half of invasive spraying in end of June, July until it gets too hot there, and then it's trying to catch up on some inventory work and plan writing when it's 102 out, and we have heat warnings across the Midwest, and then. Yeah, then by that time it's fall, and it's time to start doing TSI, and then
TSI is
which is
what?
timber stand. Yep, timber stand improvement. So that's that crop tree release that Calvin mentioned earlier. Trying to get the bad trees out of the way, or not even bad trees, just the trees that are not that don't need help. A lot of the times, get them out of the way to let our higher value both for wildlife, but also for value, because unfortunately that's the world we work in, is it's got to bring in money at some point. And then by wintertime, if I've got sales going on, I got to run around and chase loggers around, which is just a whole other side of a job that I wish I didn't have to do, man. And then if I'm lucky, around March time I get a lot of I'll say time off in air quotes, but that happens to be when I take all my vacations, and so that's mine, and it just does that on repeat.
I mean, I get
every single year.
I get lucky. I have the summers to just work on my consulting, and so that usually looks like me spraying invasive species for like 5-6 days a week in the summer for 10 hours a day trying to get these jobs done. But I love killing invasive species. It's really fun for me because I spend so much time, behind a computer, like thinking about and educating people. It's like I get out of here. I actually get my hands in natural resource management. It keeps me grounded. Plus, I hate invasive species and I love killing them.
Oh yeah,
We don't worry
and
about
you
that.
get paid. Like, come on, how can you not like all those things?
the potential for
That's a different episode.
various weird cancers and stuff like that. Whatever.
Yeah, that's not a
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
But also, glyphosate is not listed.
Yeah, it's
know.
anything that ends in quat.
Real quick.
That's not the one I'm concerned about. It's
No
all
quats.
the ones that I got to use to get all the other shit out of the way that I'm
that's fair.
concerned about.
That's fair.
Yeah, no, I don't care about Roundup.
Oh yeah.
Oh God.
No, I don't do any of those.
quats.
I don't do any of those. I'll stick with glyphosate. Give me some triclopyr.
It's a
I like a
good
little bit of
herbicide.
triclopyr. My students love to make fun of me for how much I like triclopyr. They love to make fun of me for that. It's a fantastic
Yeah,
herbicide.
it works. It works.
fantastic.
You can't argue with working.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's not too expensive. Come on, what more can you like? You know, some formulations don't even require safety glasses. Not that I don't wear them. I always wear my safety glasses. But you could not wear them if you didn't want to.
We're gonna have an episode that's just
Okay.
Power level rankings
Sorry,
of
the different episode. Different
herbicides,
episode.
right? Like,
Yeah, we don't
here's
need
your
to go
S tier
all
herbicide.
knockout on
Here's
this
your
now.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, well,
yeah, screwed.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, glyphosate
yeah.
and triclopyr are S tier. Like that's out of the way there, and then I'll stop. We don't need to spoil the whole episode. Okay, all right. So let's start to wrap things up here. We're going on 45 minutes. I've let my cat out. All right, let's start to wrap some things up here. So one of my big motivators for doing this is to, teach people about the woods.
I mean,
because,
very similar.
I think the woods are really
reason.
cool,
Like,
and I love them, and I'm also.
I
want
to bring the
why
natural
are you-
world
why do
to
you guys wanna
people,
do this
and
podcast?
specifically to the folks who maybe don't have, didn't have the kind of childhood that I had, always going out hiking and camping and doing Boy Scouts and all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people underestimate how much the natural world and the field of natural resources, which, as we've discussed, is a massively broad field, how much that actually touches all of our lives every single day, whether you live next to a cornfield or you live in New York City. Like, it still impacts you, and I feel like this is a good opportunity to kind of bring that to folks, and also maybe bridge a little bit of that rural urban divide, as much as that might be real or imagined. Like, natural resources are everywhere, people are everywhere, but there's this sense that, like, rural areas and rural people are more sort of in touch with natural resources in the natural world, and maybe that's true to some extent. There's certainly elements where it's not true, and I feel like this is a good opportunity to just kind of bring people together. It's a big tent. Let's all get under it.
All right, John, why are you doing this?
Yeah, free therapy. We said, like, three white guys will start a podcast rather than go to therapy. That's part of it. Therapy is expensive. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I personally, like, I've run into a lot of frustrations with the education side of things, and so we've done a lot of educating here in my part of the Midwest around water quality, and I'm waiting for the Farm Bureau at some point to say, yeah, you should drink the water with nitrates. It helps you do stuff. And I'm just like, I don't. And we've been talking about it for however many years, decades. But I like I like talking about forestry. I could talk about forestry till I'm blue in the face. So I'm more than happy to help, Yeah. Hey, if it helps one person, one kid like me who didn't have the words for what is forestry or what is wildlife management or what is stream biology or whatever, like, that's what I'm hoping for, in a perfect world. Yeah, because if I had found this when I was a kid, like, it would have shaved, however many thousands of dollars off my student loan bill. So that's something good, I guess. So a little bit, smaller scale than that, I think, is what I'm shooting for. Again, mostly I just like talking about this stuff. So
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love talking about it too. That's why a big reason why we're doing this is, I talk about natural resources for a good chunk of my day, and then we're going to do this for fun because I love talking about natural resources, and I think that everyone else should love talking about natural resources too. And I want everyone to know what the tree in their front yard is and how it works. I don't need you to know the whole ecosystem around it, but I want you to know at least what it is and how it works. And so that's part of the reason I'm doing it. And then, just like John said, also free therapy, because there's a lot of scary things out there that we deal with that we honestly shouldn't have to deal with, but we do, because like that's the nature of the world that we live in. We live in a world of climate change, of invasive species, and chronic wasting disease. And so just help get some of this stuff out of my mind.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I don't wake my wife up because I'm giving presentations about oak wilt.
Yeah, honestly, that's probably the better. That's the better thing. Is trying to save her, that poor woman.
She's got enough other things to deal with. She doesn't need to deal with me anymore.
Nah,
Okay,
my mind
guys,
is
do we have any
completely empty.
closing thoughts for our first episode of Seedpod?
And growing, that's years of work.
Okay.
Yeah, we got
I'm
40
pretty sure I've
episode
thought
ideas,
and then forgotten of
which
like
is
10 more episode
basically
ideas
2 years
while we were doing this.
So
Perfect.
we're good.
Okay.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Wonderful. Well, just thank you guys for being on and for letting me host this first one. So our next episode will be about forests. What are they? How do they work? And I think, John, you are hosting that one. Oh, or am I hosting?
Can I ask
Nope,
a teaser
it's
question?
you.
Are we gonna?
I don't host.
Are we gonna talk
I
about
don't host anything
what
until
a
we start
forest
talking
is
about
ecologically
birth, life, and
versus
death
what
of
a forest
services,
is
so.
legally?
Yes, please.
Excellent.
Yes. We will talk about all of those things, and then a few more. So, it's going to be a fun conversation. I think, while John and I are foresters, we do love our other ecosystems, and so we
hell
will
yeah.
not try to over-represent forests. However, what a forest is and how it works is going to be an ongoing major theme in this, in this podcast. But also, what other ecosystems there are and how they work are going to be other themes that we're going to talk about and look at and discuss. We're going to use forests as a lens to talk about and think about other ecosystems, but it is one of the, forests are a major biome and ecosystem type. So it's a great thing to understand.
They're charismatic.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't
No,
love a tree? And if you don't love a tree, don't listen to this podcast.
Literally, yeah.
It's that simple. Okay, all right. So let's give a little sign off here. All right. Thank you guys so much thank you everyone for listening. We hope you guys will learn something in the future. Probably not too much on this episode, but in future episodes. My name's Calvin, and this has been SeedPod.